Hello, I'm Claire Snowdon-Darling, the head of Balanced Wellness and the College of Functional Wellness, and I specialise in stress and hormones and emotional issues. And I am here with the wonderful Emily Perry. Over to you, Emily.
Hi, I'm Emily Perry and I am currently the HR Director at the Shaw Group. We are a construction recruitment business. But prior to that, I've had my own HR consultancy and I've worked in HR for about the last 20 years, which is terrifying. But
And we felt really compelled to have this conversation, didn't we? Because we have had a few conversations in the past where we realized that we're actually talking about the same things, but from different perspectives. And there's an awful lot going on right now because of the pandemic. And actually, that's not even true. It was going on before, but the pandemic has actually really revealed a lot of what's going on in the HR world. And I think the question that we're talking around today is it really HR's responsibility for bringing well-being into the business place?
yes.
Because that feels quite controversial at the moment. So I found it really helpful when you kind of gave a bit of an outline of what's happening for HR people right now.
So it's really interesting. So obviously we are sort of hopefully at the tail end of this pandemic, and we are getting to the point now where we're starting to talk about bringing people back to work and, resuming some form of normal life. However, I think what has really happened over the last year is that wellness and well-being has been kind of really forced into the limelight because of the pandemic and because of the fact that we've been dealing with a medical crisis across the world. I think it's really made everyone sort of stand up and kind of really look at wellness and well-being again. And I think really within the HR world, we've had so much to kind of contend with on a people basis over the last year. And now sort of as we're coming out of things, the questions around wellness and well-being are coming to the forefront again. And I find it really, really interesting as somebody that's worked in HR for a long time now, to really try and poke around this topic of whether actually is it HR's responsibility? Because, you're a wellness expert, Claire. You've done, years and years of training around this stuff. So are we kind of loading up the wrong people with this within a business? Are we just kind of dumping it on HR and having an expectation that they will know what to do around it? And actually, what are the implications of that? I think that there's a very sort of, wellness and well-being and mental health. It kind of has this very fluffy connotation within the business world, or it has done, definitely. And it's almost like that nice to have, that kind of, let's have a well-being program, and let's have a fruit bowl in the office, and let's have an employee assistance program, and there we go, we can talk about it on LinkedIn and show how amazing we are. But we're not really talking about the reality of dealing with poor health and how you do that. We're not talking about the reality of working with an employee who has a serious mental health condition. And I just really feel like now is the time that we should be addressing this and thinking about some real solutions of, yes, how we can help, but also how we protect ourselves as well, because it's so much, it's so much pressure.
Yes, so much pressure. I mean, I work with quite a few people in HR, and I've heard stories of, can I have a chat with you? And then the member of staff coming to speak to them has actually got rope burns around their neck where they've tried to commit suicide. And I mean, you're right. I've spent years training to be able to navigate that. And even that, I'd be going, wow, you need to see some, I'd be referring on, like that would be, okay, in that kind of, absolutely acute situation, you need serious mental health professionals. And I've heard about a lot of HR people doing mental health first aid courses online, which is great. but it is nowhere near enough. Absolutely nowhere near enough. I mean, I would be sat there in that situation going, okay, you are clearly, a threat to yourself. This is something where your GP needs to be involved, and I've been trained with the protocol of what to do in that situation. Whereas suddenly somebody who's been trained for corporate HR is going, I have no idea what to do. And you're absolutely right. The pressure and the responsibility is huge. And I think it always has been, but it's been very easy to kind of, pass it off or just sort of hush it up and make it go away.
Yeah.
And now we're in a situation where it's just so revealed. It's everywhere.
It's everywhere. And I think corporate businesses are under so much pressure to show what they're doing for their CSR and to show what they're doing for well-being. And I think this is where the sort of real danger lies, is that it just becomes another thing that we have to have a well-being program, or we have to do this, so let's give it to HR, they can do it. But fundamentally, what is the results of that? What is the actual reality of what we're dealing with here? And I think that's what I really want to talk about is, what are the situations that are being brought to us, and actually is that our responsibility to fix it? And
I think the thing is, like, I get quite excited about HR because my vision for the world is that there are millions of frontline coaches who have been trained in the wellness industry, in mental health, and in corporate, that we all have a shared understanding and some kind of training where when people need help, they can actually get help that they can trust and rely on. And when someone is at the end of their capacity, they know that they can be referred on. Like, that's how we change the world. That's how we make the world a better place. That's why I teach, because I'm so passionate about, making an army of amazing practitioners. And HR absolutely could have a place in that. The problem is, as I see it, and I've worked with quite a lot of companies over the years, the problem is that there aren't enough. It's almost like, if you want HR to have that responsibility and you want to send people with those issues to HR, then HR also has to have some power along with that. Because one of the big bugbears that I've had is, I've often in the past been contacted by businesses where they'll say, oh, I've got this one member of staff always complaining of backache. Can you do something about it? And I've either supported the member of staff, done some work with them, and then even supported them to write a letter, because we get to the point where it's like, actually, it's your chair. So, okay, let's write a letter stating your need and I'll support you with that. But I've also then, had situations where businesses have asked me for a report, and confident, with all the relevant information staying confidential, because actually this person still, despite having been paid for private sessions with a wellness expert, not taken up any of the recommendations that I've made. And so the company have kind of gone, they're still not doing anything, they're still dramatically off sick all the time, but they've not put into place anything you've said. So we actually want to have some kind of power to say, this isn't the right fit for you anymore. And this is something I know you and I are both deeply passionate about, is self-responsibility. So self-responsibility is so important. And I'm a big believer that if we're really going to change things in the corporate world, self-responsibility has to be a KPI. Like we were saying earlier before this, I'm self-employed, you've been self-employed historically. If I went out and got really, really drunk at the weekend and then couldn't do my clinic, on a couple of days later because I had a 2-day hangover, I'm not going to get paid. And also my reputation and people's expectations, and that's not cool. So why is that okay in a corporate environment? Why is it okay just to go, oh, I don't really have to care because I'm going to get paid? I'm not okay with that. So I'm a massive believer in KPIs becoming part of wellness, KPIs becoming part of someone's contractual obligations. And if that's how we have to start forcing self-responsibility, then that's how it starts to happen. And I think there's a difference, isn't there, between I'm doing everything I can and actually I've had an accident, or I'm doing everything right, but I've had a flare up, and there's some lenience, there's tolerance and understanding. But there are enough people unemployed who would be desperate for the work, who wouldn't be going out getting drunk at the weekends, eating all the wrong kinds of food, who would actually be going, no, I want to be able to show up and do my best and have the right productivity in this position.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that that's how, because again, I think in our last talk that we did, we talked around, this whole rhetoric around how does HR actually add value within a business? Well, it adds value by holding people to account over their KPIs. And, in my role in particular, I don't actually call myself HR within the business, because fundamentally my role is to hold people to account over their performance. So, you're not performing, let's talk about why you're not performing, and then I coach people through. I don't see that there's any difference around why we shouldn't be holding people to account over their well-being and putting self-responsibility back on the table, and not placing that responsibility on a business.
I absolutely agree. And I say that as a menopause expert and someone who's been through menopause. And, I couldn't plan for when that was going to happen. That happened early. But as soon as I started to become unwell, then it would be my responsibility to, show up and go, something's going on. I'm not entirely sure what. This is what I'm doing to deal with the issue. And what leniency can you offer? It's a two-way street, right? It's not saying we need everyone to be automatons.
No.
But equally, the human body isn't coping right now with the amount of processed food and pesticides and stress and all of those things. So this has to start with self-responsibility.
Completely. And I actually think there's kind of two strands here. So you've got the element of the self-responsibility, people taking responsibility and ownership for their own stuff. And then us as HR people really looking at the culture of our organizations as well.
Yes.
Because there is zero point in having a well-being program and, all this good stuff around well-being if your culture is toxic. There's no point. I know, like, I've heard of situations where, people are required to put on their Zoom from 9 till 5 when they're working at home, so that their managers can check that they're working. I mean, this is crazy. You cannot create an environment of wellness and people performing at their best if they're stressed and they're anxious, because they're being monitored day in, day out. So
there was a big hoo-ha about spy tech, I read.
Yeah.
Proper spy tech used in businesses where you can see how much downtime people have had. And again, you're right, that's a toxic environment.
Completely. And I think, again, in both circumstances, it comes back to, I know the work that I've done with you, Claire, is around being an adult and, moving from this kind of childlike state of everyone is going to look after me to actually moving into being an adult. So whether that is going, actually, I am not performing in my role because I'm drinking too much or because I'm doing drugs or whatever that is, and actually I need to take responsibility for that. Or it's as an HR professional going, something's not right in this business, our culture isn't right, I need to take responsibility and to sort that out and manage that. So I really think that with all, it's so interesting, we're talking about well-being, but I think what we're really talking about is boundaries and having that self-responsibility to show up for ourselves and be the role model for other people as well.
Yes, well, because also if we're not in that adult place, it's not only are we looking for someone else to parent us, and it's someone else will tell me what to do, but also it's the what can I get away with without being told off? What can I actually get away with? As opposed to this adult place of, okay, yes, I'm going to be accountable because this is a position I want to be in. And if you don't want to be in your position, leave, don't be in it. Someone else wants it and you want something else. So go find something else to do. And the amount of people I've heard in the pandemic go, oh, I couldn't change job now because of your pandemic. And then I've got, as many other people going, decided to take the plunge because, you know, life's too short. And then, within a month, I've ended up in something else and I'm really happy. So we can't, you know, this fear-based strategy thinking that just keeps us locked into a position that we're not happy being in, and we're not thriving. And therefore the business isn't thriving.
No.
And this culture of toxicity I find really, really interesting, because it's very common for me that I've turned up at a business and I've been, you know, paid to do a talk on stress. So let's talk about stress. Let's talk about all of the insidious symptoms that are associated with stress and what that really means in your body. And everyone sits there going, oh gosh, yeah, that really resonates. That really resonates. And then you know, I've been in businesses where they'll have paid for me to do sort of a half-hour consultation with their staff. And then the staff are coming in and I'm saying, okay, well, what are you eating? And da, da, da. Oh, well, I haven't got time. I never get to take lunch. And what do you mean? Oh no, I never get to take lunch. So your business has just paid a chunk of money to have a wellness professional come and teach you about stress. You know, you all get the nice PowerPoint, you've all had an individual consultation, but then you're not even allowed to have lunch. How does that make sense?
Yep.
And I've heard of that a lot through the pandemic. All these PowerPoints coming around about, you know, because just so we can tick the box of our SCR, but our CSR, corporate social responsibility, isn't it? But okay, but no, I want to book you in for a meeting at 7 p.m. Like, hang on, you just sent a message around about boundaries. Come on.
Exactly. And I think this is where HR should be showing up. It is to tackle this stuff within a business and to be pushing back and saying, you know, and refuse to do the wellness stuff. You know, I think if that was in my business and I was being pressured to kind of put in place this lovely fluffy wellbeing program, but fundamentally I know that everyone's really unhappy, I'd be saying, no, I am not going to do that. I, as a professional person, am not going to be insincere and put my name to something that I know is not real.
Yes, that feels, even as you said that, it felt like somebody having a diagnosis of clinical depression and then the answer being, let's give you a makeover. Like, let's put a bowl of fruit in. It feels the same. Do you know what I mean? Like, there's this really big issue in the corporate world. We'll put a bowl of fruit in the kitchen.
Yeah,
That'll solve it. We'll
solve
send
it.
around a PowerPoint about wellness. So I think it is a really exciting time because I think the parameters of HR can change. And it is interesting, I think, that a lot of people who are drawn to HR is quite commonly women.
Mm-hmm.
And so the tragedy is you then do get the label, I remember you telling me this, of being the mummies, which, I mean, firstly makes me cringe, but you have less power than the mummies, right? Because you can't ground anyone and you can't make them eat their greens. So you don't even get the good bits being able to make it work. So it does attract more women, which is actually the same as within the wellness industry. Mm-hmm. And because of the empathy skills that women tend to have, and I'm not saying that men don't, because I know that there are some excellent, you know, male HR people out there, but it just, and male nurses, but it requires a different form of empathy. And because of that, there could be some really good training for people in HR that then says, okay, this is now when you refer on, and here is what that looks like. This is training that you need to do. But ultimately, the one theme that I have found that runs through a lot of people in HR is this desire to prove themselves, to be really hard on themselves, and to feel guilty and responsible. Like, it's my responsibility that those staff are feeling awful and I have to fix it and I have to make it better. And that's the bit first and foremost that has to change. So the way that I see it is I feel like there's three things that need to change here. The first is the culture in the business, which the HR department can help with. Then there's the HR training, and also the training individually for the HR person, because once the HR department are corporate sort of trained, that can then filter down to the staff because you lead by example. But it's the personal work that needs to happen first, to learn how to not beat myself up, to not work all hours, to put my own boundaries in.
and to not do this caretaking thing that a lot of us do. And, I don't do it now, but earlier on in my career, I really burnt myself out with this, because
Yes.
you're just taking on other people's stuff all day long, and you're dealing with this problem and that problem and this, particularly when I had my own business and I was a consultant, all I would do all day long was rush from this client to that client, taking on this person's problems, that person's problems, and I just felt this overwhelming need that it was my responsibility to fix this stuff. And that resulted in me fundamentally having a nervous breakdown, because I just was so overwhelmed with other people's stuff all the time. And I've never experienced that sort of working in-house as an HR person, but I imagine it's absolutely no different. And I think that what really saved me in that situation was learning to put some very clear boundaries in place and say, actually, no, I am not going to talk to you now, or I need to be over here doing this, so I'm going to concentrate my time over here. And actually, it is not my job to fix your problems. I can listen and I can ask you some questions around that, but fundamentally, it is your job to fix your stuff. It is not my job. And I think
Yes.
that, again, we're not taught any of this stuff, and I think, like you were saying, HR, we're constantly under pressure to prove our worth the whole time, because, we don't sell typically unless you are a consultant and you're fee earning, but typically within a business, we're not money generating. So there's always a question mark over us saying, well, actually, how are you adding value here? And actually, what that really is about is making sure that the people within our business are well enough to perform, to generate the money that the business
Yes.
needs to thrive. And and it's our responsibility to kind of put the tools and the measures in place, like you say, but that has to come through our own education and training first.
Yes, and then I guess the part of me that goes into sort of like, oh, panic and fear about that is I'm reminded of back in, and I don't know if it's the same anymore, or I don't know, but I know back in the day, sort of, in the early 90s, if you wanted to work for an airline, it was, well, you have to be the right height and you have to be the right weight and you have to, and those kind of metrics are not necessarily metrics that we're talking about, right? We're talking about, I remember my family ran a business, and they had a support staff, sort of a call center, and it was typically young tech people that were staffing this, and it was really common that they would kind of drag themselves in with their energy drink, and then on a little bit of probing you'd find they'd been up till 3 a.m. playing computer games, eating takeaway pizza. They were off sick a lot, not really engaged in the work. You found out that they're just mismanaging a lot of their calls because they haven't got the energy. They just they cannot function in the workplace. Those are the kind of metrics, like, basically, are you actually looking after your human body?
Yeah.
We're not saying you can't go and have a takeaway curry, but if you're repeatedly off, sick, or you're not being productive, this needs to be looked at, and then some KPIs put into place.
Totally. Like, if you can function really well on shit food, booze, drugs, etc., etc., crack
Well
on.
done. I'm delighted for you and very envious.
I'm jealous. But fundamentally, I think what we're saying here is that it is tackling where the issues are and making sure wellness and well-being is something that is actually really adding value and something that is showing up as a proper business tool rather than a fluffy tick box,
Yes.
which we're just doing because we have to.
Yes. Yes, because it's like we're still looking outside of ourselves for the adults who are going to deal with that. The doctors will deal with that. Someone else will deal with that, except that there are no adults dealing with this. Like, this is the big learning from the pandemic, because I'm not being funny, but I've watched some of those government briefings and they don't look like any adults are showing up. And I think half the time they're looking around going, when are the adults showing up? Like,
Exactly.
no, there are no adults.
There are no adults.
And so this is part of the journey, isn't it? That, because I experienced the same thing when I started becoming a wellness practitioner, and we were trained, don't take on people's stuff. And you can hear those words, but I didn't know what that meant, and I was completely ill-equipped, and I'd done loads of training. You hadn't. And so I was at least able to go, oh, I think I'm taking on people's stuff and I need to go and get some supervision around this. You wouldn't have even clocked that. So we absolutely need to bring awareness to that, to people in HR.
Definitely. And I think, we touched on it in the last talk that we did. And I mentioned that I have supervision in my role because, again, it's about, having someone that you can kind of offload to, that isn't your family, that isn't your partner, that isn't your friend, because quite frankly, that's boring. It's about having someone that you can go to as a professional to talk about the stuff that's going on in your work, in your environment, confidentially, obviously, but to then have somebody maybe challenge some of your assumptions as well. Because again, as very untrained people within this space, we run the risk of projecting a lot of our stuff onto the people that we're working with as well. And, I've seen this with my own eyes, particularly when I was consulting. I used to kind of go in and consult for businesses that had HR departments already. And I would be in redundancy meetings where the HR person was making someone redundant and they were having an anxiety attack because it was triggering when they were made redundant like 5 years ago. And it's like, hang on a second, like, you're projecting your stuff onto this person. And I think there's a very real danger that we can do that. I had a situation a few years ago, you're talking around sort of the suicide side of things. And I was dealing with a guy who had horrific bipolar disorder. I mean, it was horrendous. And I have experience of, bipolar disorders, psychiatric issues in my family. So it was very triggering for me. And again, this stuff, like, we're not trained in any of this. We're really not. So again, I think it's about, really taking ownership of that stuff and making sure that we have an avenue to go talk to someone and to have someone support us through this stuff as well.
Yes, I absolutely agree. Because where would you offload that to? Your line manager, and then they'd offload it to their line manager, and then ultimately you end up at the director. But then what?
But then what happens is they go, well, Emily, you should know how to deal with this. And you're like,
which point was I trained?
Yeah, what point did I become a doctor as well as this? Like, it's and that's the thing as well. And then that kind of taps into that whole us feeling not like we're not good enough as well. So I think having that supervision for me has been so important.
That's bonkers to me, because I know, people in the coaching world, they actually go and do training to become a mentor. So how are you supposed to deal with that if you haven't had the training? So there's so many issues here, aren't there? And I get really excited when I see that there's a lot of issues somewhere, because I go, wow, this is ripe for change.
Yes.
So, like, how do we start the revolution? Like, what's the revolution? Because there is, corporate is so vast, and so far reaching. And so HR have a huge potential with actually just tweaking a bit of training, a bit of the basic kind of training that you get in HR could be turned around to deal with this. Or even if it's not part of your basic training, if businesses start going, actually, we're going to put our HR team through this bit of training, which is actually minimal amounts of money when you look at the big picture. It's tiny. Because I'm telling you that, we get a lot of inquiries for, business sort of wellness stuff. Could you just PowerPoint on stress? Could you talk about, digestive disorders and what could be done by being sedentary in the workplace? Can we have, some, yes. So just, as an aside, we do talks for businesses, but it's no use doing those talks if the people can go, oh yeah, that was interesting information. I'm just gonna have my Greggs for lunch, and or the HR teams are so overwhelmed that they don't know what to do. So a big place that we're now focusing our work is actually doing the support training for people in HR, because it has to start here. Exactly as you said, where are my triggers? How do I change that? What are my boundaries? How do I enforce those? What about nonviolent communication? How do I tackle some really big conflicts in the workplace without just kowtowing down and trying to prove my worth all the time? How can I stand in my full potential? How can I, be that person? That I think is the most important work. And then it's how do we filter this into the business, that it then starts to become part of people's self-responsibility around wellness, because that's when you can have wellness PowerPoints, when you've actually got HR going, here's the boundary and here's the KPI.
Completely. And, like I take myself as an example, my business paid for me to come on the holding space course because they felt that it was important for me to have a toolkit to be able to deal with this stuff that I'm being bought every single day. And then once I had those tools, what I now subtly do, and people don't really realize that I'm doing it, is that when I'm speaking with managers and when I'm coaching people, I am bringing these tools to the workplace and passing them on to other people as well. So it's, this subtle kind of drip effect around, okay, I'm going to take that responsibility. I'm going to go off and learn these tools. And then when I feel confident and comfortable with that stuff, I'm going to come back and I'm going to impart that knowledge. And that's what changes cultures.
Yes.
It's the behaviors and it's the how we do stuff around here that changes cultures. Yes. It's not having fancy values that are put up on the walls. It's actually, okay, we have our values and that's cool, but actually, are we going to live and breathe by this stuff? And are we going to use the tools that we have to make this a better place?
That's really exciting when you say it like that. It's really exciting.
It's really
that is huge potential for change for minimal money, because if you were starting to look at that from a big picture perspective, I've been involved in businesses with huge budgets for things, and there could be a workshop for a rebrand that could cost extortionate amounts of money, but aren't going to actually fundamentally change the values, the culture, the day-to-day experience and the productivity in the business.
No. Yeah, you're so right.
And I actually don't think that there are many people really talking about this, which is why we're so passionate to talk about it. So one of the ways that we do that through Balanced Wellness UK, balancedwellness.co.uk, first one was Instagram, is that we offer a 12-hour online program for people who just want to start learning, what are my boundaries, what's my stuff. So that basically is just fundamental training for staff and HR people. That's like that's the place to start. And it's 12 hours. It's really affordable. Even if your business won't pay for it, it's, less than a pair of shoes. And I'm not talking Louboutins. And then definitely a lot cheaper than a pair of Louboutins. Then if you're actually like, wow, okay, yeah, this makes sense. And I want to be able to do what Emily's been talking about. Okay, I want to actually be able to put this more in the workplace. Then we do holding space practitioner training, which does what it says on the tin. It is designed for people, any practitioner of any kind of wellness, personal trainers, HR managers and directors who have to hold space for other people's stuff. Like, how do we do that properly? Yeah. How do we do that and keep ourselves safe and not take responsibility and not caretake? And then we also offer symptom assessors for members of staff. And I love this as a wellness offering because the symptom assessor is free. Then after that, they get recommended a toolkit and they can then put those things into place. Well, that's an easy checklist for a business that's buying, those for its staff. That's an easy checklist. Did you take the symptom assessor? Have you got your toolkit? Have you actioned it? It's like seeing a therapist one-to-one, but for a fraction of the price. And so they could actually work through that for a whole year and go, I know I've been off sick a lot with this, IBS or this back pain, but I'm working through this and I'm changing that. And this is where it becomes an adulting two-way conversation.
And it's not a manager going, oh, you're feeling depressed, go for a walk. Do you know what I mean? It's not that kind of just crap that I see going on. It is, here is a tool, go take it yourself, and then you do the work.
So I think going back to our original question, is wellness and well-being HR's responsibility? I think the problem is it's not going to be anyone else's responsibility in the workplace. But HR, as it stands, can't deal with it because they don't have the training or the bandwidth or the capacity, because you've got everything else to do. So what needs to shift is the culture with the training in HR, and also the HR people going, I am not okay with this, and I want to do some self work, and I want, you know, some funding, or I'm prepared to do it myself, to actually now be able to get involved in changing the culture. And now let's talk about how we can really add value.
Exactly. 100%. 100%.
How are we going to start this revolution then? The HR revolution.
Yeah, it's exciting. It is exciting. And I think, you know, we've been talking about this for so long now. And, you know, I always think it's great to talk about this stuff and raise awareness. I will never think that that is a bad thing. But fundamentally, there has to be action. And I think that's where I've been frustrated, is around the kind of action around stuff. And I think that this really gives us the opportunity to take action and to show up. Because like you say, nobody else is going to take responsibility for it. So we may as well stand up and go, fine, give it to me and I will go run with this and let's do it properly.
But I want the proper training, and I actually want to have, for this to have meaning in the business, because that's the other thing, is there's nothing more soul destroying than actually doing a whole load of work with a member of staff when actually you then find out it was completely pointless because nothing's going to get done anyway.
Completely.
Yeah, brilliant. I love it. I love it. So if this is of interest to you, please get in touch. So Balance Wellness UK on Instagram, on Facebook, balancewellness.co.uk, on the normal website. Anything for you, Emily?
I was just going to say, if anyone is interested or wants to hear about my experiences kind of going through this process, then, you know, drop me a line on LinkedIn or wherever. I'm very happy to have a chat and sort of talk about, you know, what I've done in terms of my self-work, but also what we're doing in the business as well. I'm very happy to share that.
Oh, and I massively celebrate how progressive your business are being in supporting you in this journey, because it's part of the solution, right?
Absolutely.
Thank you, Emily. It's been glorious to talk to you.
Thanks, Claire.
Bye.
Bye.